Are we live? Amazing. Hello. It's so great to see so many people. I'm going to change to gallery. Don't need to see myself. Give me one. It's so nice to see everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Geraldine Shen. I'm class of 2001, and I'm here today to walk through how we do grilled honey buns. It's hopefully for many of us, it's a fond memory that we have of Williams, of hanging out with friends in the snack bar and consuming calories that we probably shouldn't do at the same rate these days as we did back then. But for just one Sunday, we could pretend we're back in college. So I just wanted to let you guys know that this workshop is part of a year-long series that the wonderful Alumni Office and the Society of Alumni are putting together to commemorate 200 years of the oldest, best alumni association in the universe. And so to commemorate that, we've got a series of workshops. If you haven't signed up for the other ones, make sure you do. It's an honor to kick this off. I'm glad we set the bar low, then we can go really high here on out. And we'll spend this year, I think, as a Society of Alumni, thinking about what it means to be united as a group, the different experiences that we bring, the different things that are good and bad about our beloved institution, and how we can sort of chart the course for the next 200 years to make Williams a continually better place. As we begin this program, I just wanted to, the Alumni Office, I should say, asked me to just acknowledge the legacy of the displacement of the Mohican people from the land that we're on, actually the land that I'm on right now. I live in Williamstown, very lucky to do so. I happen to live in a building that some of you might have either stayed the night in or partied at as students. My husband, Joe Bergeron, class of 2001, he and I bought Dewey House from the people who bought it from the college. So we're practically on campus. And so this land that we're on is a Mohican, traditionally Mohican land. And we want to acknowledge that and take a minute to thank them for the stewardship of the land that made it possible for us all to be here and thinking about that today. Okay, so I see some cameras on. Absolutely no pressure to do this with your camera on. I often do these kinds of things with camera off so that I can fold laundry while listening to whatever I need to be listening to. It's like the only way to survive a global health pandemic, I think. With 3 young children living at home, you might have seen them in the slideshow, seemingly making a mess whenever I'm not like physically restraining them. So I totally get it if you have other things to do, if you need to hop in and out. I do hope I see some of you with aprons on and in your kitchens. I hope some of you get started with me. We won't be able to do start to finish grilled honey bun on plate today because there's some proving in between, but we'll get started and you'll be well on your way. If people want to unmute and interrupt or just chime in at any point, please do. I hope you guys are saying in the chat where you're calling in from, what class year you are, because I would love to catch up on that afterwards if I'm not able to read it now. So, okay, so the recipe you have, hopefully received it over email, is actually a dining services recipe that I've just adapted a slight bit. Dining services has been flat out here at Williams, getting the students all settled. They've had to, as you can imagine, change a lot of their operations. So we were hoping to lure one of them into doing it with us today, but they're super busy keeping the Williams students well fed and happy. So totally understand why they weren't able to join us today, but hopefully in the future we can do version 2.0 when we're all experts with dining services coming and helping to correct us. So this is, I've adapted it for the home. I am by no means an expert baker. I think there are probably people on here who are professionals or who know how to do this much better than I am, but I like to think of it as if I can do it, you for sure can do it. this, you'll probably see, I made some batches earlier and they're not perfect, but we'll get there. They have the same ingredients and they'll taste delicious no matter how funky they look. So, but this, when I had to make a few adjustments to the recipe that I got from Dining Services. And one of them, I would love you guys to stay in touch. Let me know if you can figure out the glaze a little bit better than I have, because that was the part that I think maybe my confectioner sugar is just old. It tastes kind of like sugar that's been sitting in a drawer. So, but first tip that I have is make the glaze first. So it gives the gelatin a little bit of time to set up and have it be less, just a little bit more stable and doesn't run off as quickly. And so I usually start by making the gelatin first to let the gelatin itself bloom. So, oh, and then thank you to all of you who did prepare a kitchen scale and tolerated my milliliters, grams recipe. I think if you are going to do a lot of baking, that kind of precision is pretty helpful, because your cup of flour and my cup of flour can look very different, also depending on the kind of flour we're using. So that's why we're doing, you know, as much as possible with a scale, which I recognize not everybody has. So I will just throw out approximate imperial quantities as we go along. So, okay, so to get started with the glaze, so 60 milliliters of cold water, approximately. So the nice thing about the glaze is that, sorry, hopefully the water is not too loud here, but the nice thing about the glaze is that as you make it, you can be like, oh, this is way too runny. I want something that's more like frosting. Then you just decrease the liquid or increase the amount of sugar. And so I found that this is sort of a nice, it starts off, you know, visible on top of the honey bun, but then eventually it sort of melts a little bit and becomes more of a glaze. So 60 milligrams, 1:1, the milliliters and grams, I should say, are the same. So about 60, just approximate, it's fine. And then got powdered gelatin. You can get it in giant vats like I do, or just in little packets at the store. If you are vegan, you should look for a substitute that is not this. Okay, so then it's about, so this is about, it's about, let's see, a little bit over 2 ounces of water. And then gelatin, 1/4 teaspoon, just because that's fairly flexible in terms of how much you're actually putting in. Favorite kitchen tool? Chopstick. So if you don't have chopstick, get some. They're so handy to like do little mixing things, and you know, so multi-use. So if you don't have chopsticks, I highly recommend getting some. Okay, so then we just let that sit. You guys can see with the second camera here. We're just going to let the water and the gelatin mix together sit, and then we put like a whole ton of sugar into this container. So curious if I have enough in this bag. Powdered sugar, about 400 grams, and just go ahead and dump that in. And measuring it. Let's see. Oh, looks like we don't have quite enough in this bag. 1 sec. Okay. Second bag. Quite full here. Okay, for something like this, you can see if you measured it with volume, like a cup scoop, it's going to be quite different than depending on how much air you have when you scoop it. So we've got the powdered sugar, and then honey and a pinch of salt. So pinch of salt. What I say, 15 or 20 grams of honey. You know, when I did this, when I saw a college recipe for this, this was the only honey. I'll zero this out in the honey bun recipe. So that made me a little bit sad, but I understand honey is not a cheap ingredient to get. And so I actually did adjust the bun recipe to add a little bit of honey into the bun recipe just so that we could authentically claim it was a honey bun. Okay, just about that much. For those of you who are getting nervous at the height of my powdered sugar to the size of the vessel, I'm with you, but it'll be okay. Okay, let's see. And then a little bit of vanilla, quarter teaspoon or so. You know, I actually, when I was testing out different batches, I accidentally grabbed the wrong container and I put orange essence into the glaze instead. And it was really yummy. So it was one of those happy mistakes where I just grabbed the nearest bottle I could find, and then I was mixing it. I was like, this smells so strange. What is happening? And it turns out I had grabbed the orange essence instead of the vanilla. So once you add a little bit of water, it'll decrease the loft and we'll be able to not have a huge mess, hopefully. And then if you don't, I do an immersion blender just to make this easy. If you don't have an immersion blender, totally fine. You can use a hand blender. You can use just some good old fashioned elbow grease and a whisk or a spatula. But the point is, in this case, is just to combine the ingredients. It doesn't have to be anything super special. So I usually like pull it up and down slightly, try not to let it touch air. Does anybody want to say anything? I feel weird here, just like talking into the void. I see some faces, so I think people hear me. Nobody looks terribly miserable yet. So feel free to, you know, tell us your tips for making glaze.
I have a question. This is Mary Beth. It doesn't have a yield on this. And when I made the glaze first, I thought, oh my, I have very few people at home. So how many people am I going to be sharing this with?
Okay. Thank you for asking, Mary Beth. I will also say that this tells you a little bit about my family. I doubled the college's glaze recipe because the first time I made it, like there was no way it was going to make it across 12-ish honey buns for me to enjoy eating it. So I for sure doubled the glaze. I should have told you that soon. But this recipe, interestingly, when they sent it along, it was printed out of the dining services system. So it's like it had been scaled down from, you know, I don't know, making like dozens and dozens at a time. So this makes typically about 12. But the glaze with generous glazing.
Generous glazing is always appreciated.
Only live once.
I will say, this is Vanessa Johnson, 95. I'm thankful that we don't have to follow along precisely because I realize that all my honey has, what's the word I want? It's all granulated. So I've got to heat it on the stove so that I can actually have liquid honey to be able to add the right amount. I'm stymied a bit by the kitchen scale because I have really not a good one. I have like this, which is not it's a scale, but it's not going to allow me, it's not nearly as precise as yours. So I appreciate any approximations. Like you said, a quarter teaspoon, that's really helpful.
Yeah, I'll also, so if I ever forget to say it, I did jot down some notes. We can also send it out after. I will, you know, just like chime in and say, hey, how much do you think that is? Or does it really matter if it's super scientific?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
So yeah, so like I said, I make the glaze first because I like for it to set up a little bit. And, you know, actually I will say all of this great kitchen equipment. So aforementioned husband, Joe Bergeron, class of 01, he showed up to our relationship owning all this stuff already. So this was like a really fun thing. We did not, our wedding registry was actually kind of difficult because we had like the KitchenAid and the food processor and the stand mixer all already. But I mentioned that because like the scale can be really helpful if, you know, somebody in your household is a coffee snob, because we have to measure our coffee beans by the gram in this household, not my choice, somebody else's. And therefore we own multiple kitchen scales and he gets the credit for acquiring the gadgets. Okay, so that's the glaze. I have it sitting off to the side just to let it sort of thicken and solidify a little bit. And we can move on to the actual buns. Does that sound good, everybody? Oh my God, Melissa Swan. I'm sorry, I'm gonna take a minute to say hi to people. I love this. This makes me so happy. I will say prepping for this was a little stressful, and you'll see some, my earlier batch had some problems, but seeing all these fun names and people that I know well or have worked with or have been on the Society of Alumni Executive Committee with, Vidisha. It's so good to see this really lovely community of people. So, all right. For the buns. So I just put stuff directly into my mixer right here. Some people, you know, I didn't come up with a really nice like mise en place so that we can all, you know, just throw the little amounts in, because I thought it might be helpful just for you guys to see me do it, but also then, you know, see how sometimes, you know, there are little mess ups and stuff. So, okay, so what I usually start with is I start by mixing the water with the powdered milk. So I've got this 2-cup container here, and then something to do is, I don't know if you guys can see, I've got my sink over to the right here. So putting it in a different container to add while you're measuring is often quite helpful, because then if you know, you can control it a little bit better. So so for this, it's about 290 milliliters of water. I decreased it slightly from their recipe just to, because I felt like my dough was a little sticky. So 290 milliliters, and then I need all of this. Oh my gosh, that's perfect. Amazing. 290 milliliters is, per my cup measure, about 1.5 cups of water. Okay. And then powdered milk here. About 34 grams, so zero it out again. And then I think when I measured this, it was about 5 tablespoons. Let's see if that holds true. Oops, I have it here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Can I just add, why use powdered milk when you can in water? Why not just use milk?
You know, it's interesting. I think, okay, so I'm not a food scientist, but I had that same question when I was making bread in our bread machine. And I guess the way that this, you know, this is not just milk that's been dehydrated, I believe. It's got, maybe it is, but it, the way it, so the chemistry behind it, I think this is superior for different kinds of recipes. So somebody who's a chemist or food scientist, please chime in if I just made that up. But, you know, you could also experiment with that and see if it makes a difference. I'm guessing the milk is this, you know, this consistency here is much lighter than milk. It's not, you know, it doesn't feel, viscous is the wrong word, but it's not quite the same consistency as milk. So I mix that up with my chopstick again, and then yeast. We have lots of yeast in our household, but it's about 2 packets if you get small packets at the store. So about 14 grams. And I believe it was about 4 teaspoons, I think a little shy of 4 teaspoons. But this is one of those things where if you're a little bit off, it's not going to make a big difference. You're going to have yeast in it. It's going to rise. It's going to be really nice. We're doing it now so that we can see if bubbles form, so we know that it's activated. But if you don't have exactly 14 grams, it won't be the end of the world. If we have bread bakers here, I just love the smell of yeast. So good in this, when you're just getting like some batter or dough ready. Amazing. Okay, so there we go. 14. I stir it up so that they can all hang out together. Go. And then hopefully, I guess you see it here. You'll see in a bit that these will like form little bubbles to show us the yeast is alive and working. That out of the way. Okay.
Quick question. So did you not have to start with warm water? It didn't have to be 100 and whatever that you usually have for rising bread?
Yeah, great question. The yeast that I use, the instant yeast, I forget the brand name, it's SAFview, SAF or something like that. No, it looks a little bit different. It's not Fleischmann's, it's different than that. It is like magical and it doesn't need special attention, which is just right for me, because if it needed sort of like super precise special attention, I would probably not succeed. So I know that you can buy this yeast at many grocery stores. Like if you are a King Arthur fan, like that's the kind of yeast that they sell on their website. So I think it's French, but it works brilliantly. It comes in this block. And then you open up the bag and it's loose. So yeah. Okay, so that's bubbling now. So then we come to the main ingredients here. So just put it right in here. Speaking of King Arthur, we went up there, Norwich, pretty close by to Williamstown. Got a giant bag of flour, which we're pretty excited about. Let's see. Okay, so I believe for those of you writing this down, 530 grams of bread flour is just about 3 cups. Okay, so first cup in there, 150. 330. So that was 3 cups, not quite enough. So I'm going to add a little bit more. So 3-ish cups. And then salt, about 8 grams, sort of like a super generous pinch or 2. It depends on the kind of salt you're using. So, you know, anywhere between like 6 to 8 grams is fine. But like, you know, like a good pinch with multiple fingers. And then 40 grams of sugar, which is like a little bit less than a 1/4 cup. And then shortening. Okay, right. 55 grams of shortening. So the 55 grams of shortening, I think it was about 1/3 of a cup when I like measured it out. Sometimes you can ask Alexa these things, actually. I think this one I had to figure out for myself. So 55. 49.
Could you use butter?
You could, but I don't think it would give you the same consistency. So this is where the Authentic Dining Services recipe comes in. Like I said, I tweaked it, I added honey, but I don't get the feeling that they use massive quantities of butter in their baked goods, just for price and sort of stability reasons. Shortening is more stable than butter, both like, you know, in storage, but also I think once it's in the baked good.
Geraldine, we have a couple of questions in the chat from Michael. He's saying he saw in a recipe calling for fresh or brewer's yeast. Is dry yeast a good substitute?
Yeah, this is instant yeast. It's not fresh yeast. And if you know, sorry, go ahead.
Is this the Safe Red Instant or this SAF Gold?
Red. Thank you for looking.
I'll put it in the chat for folks.
Yeah. Thank you.
And then I was also asking, I noted you use low-fat powdered milk. Any risk in using whole powdered milk?
Nope. Probably will taste yummier from, you know, I don't know, actually. I've only found low fat in many grocery stores. Like this was a packet that I got at Walmart. Okay, so then 15 grams of honey. So I took my honey and I put it into a small squeezy container like this. I had the top on earlier, but it was really slow and annoying. So I've got the top removed. So 15 grams is less than a tablespoon. And if you do more than a tablespoon, I don't think that's the end of the world. You just need to know that your dough might be a little bit stickier to work with. for those of you who've read the recipe, jumping ahead a little bit here, this is plot twist. We're not actually baking anything, even though, you know, we said this was a baking workshop. These are essentially donuts that we're making. They are fried. And so I think that makes it a little messier for sure, but it means that if the dough isn't sort of like the perfect consistency, you're going to be frying it anyway. So if your dough feels a little bit, you know, more moist to you than it otherwise should be, you could add a little bit of flour, you know, decrease the honey next time. But that's why I think some of these ratios aren't like super precise, because it's not like a baguette that you're trying to make and perfect. All right, so that's the flour, salt, sugar, honey, shortening. Okay, we need vanilla extract, and then it's a little confusing the way it's written on the recipe. On the list, you only need 1 egg for this part, so you could make that note to yourself, just 1 egg right now, because the second egg is used for an egg wash. So this is about 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And again, one of those things where more or less isn't gonna make or break this recipe, but 2 teaspoons vanilla, and then an egg. They're local eggs from our good friend 328 North Farm. Anybody who's in Williamstown, make sure you check them out. Most valuable part of the recipe here. Oh, look at that. Big giant shard. All right, it's out. Okay, so then these ingredients took us a couple minutes to put together. So by now, we can check on the milk, water, and yeast. And mine has bubbled up really nicely. Can you see it here? I don't know if it's how well you can see it, but you can tell that it's definitely, there's been some action. So you just dump it in. And then and then I'm going to put it in to the stand mixer. Again, if you don't have a stand mixer, you can still do this. It will require a lot of energy though, because it is a dough. You do want to incorporate it really well. But the idea is to mix it until the ingredients are all combined, and then like keep working at it for another several minutes so that some gluten forms, and so that there's some structure to the bread, to the bun. And when you're doing it by hand, that just takes a lot longer. So I would sort of at least double the minutes that we've put in here. Sort of you'd want to be kneading for maybe about 10 minutes, depending on how strong you are. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that. Let's see. And then I might mute us and you guys can ask questions if you want, because it will get kind of noisy.
Geraldine, while we're mixing, Michael has a question that you can ruminate on. He's asking, what would you say is the part of the recipe that noobs are most likely to mess up, or most likely to think this step is no biggie, but it really is a very important step?
I'm gonna mute. It's gonna be a little noisy. Can you guys hear me? Not really. Move this out of the way a little bit. So you'll see coming up, we are going to cut the rolled honey buns. And I did a batch earlier so that we wouldn't have to wait for 45 minutes together, although that would be fun to hang out. And you'll see that that can be a very messy process. When I was doing it, the Zoom was already live, and my husband's like, "Are you on mute?" because there was a lot of color commentary about how it was going. So you'll see when I roll and cut the buns themselves, sometimes, you know, it gets a little messy. I would say that part for me is usually hardest. And then there's some little tips and tricks I'll show you as we go along that makes the next few steps, I'm going to turn this up in a sec, a little bit easier, but I'll point them out. But it does get much messier from here on out.
And G, again, while we're on mute, a couple of questions in the chat. What speed are you using on the dough hook? And then what will the dough look like when it's ready?
Sorry, to hear us, just turn it off. So I put it on stir to combine for 2 minutes, and I usually pop it up to 2 or 4, only medium speed for the forming of the dough. When you look at the dough, let's see, I'm going to turn it back on to continue to mix a little bit, but it does start to pull away from the edges. It won't pull away completely cleanly based on my experience. And that I found is because it is kind of a moist dough. So does that help? Okay, since this is cooking on TV, this batch actually could, you know, it could go elsewhere, but you see how it's still, can you see in this camera how it's very sticky, it's gooey, it's hanging off the dough hook. It'll be a little bit better than that because I didn't go for the full 5 minutes here, but it is, from my experience, it is going to be pretty sticky like that. You can remove it, it does like to stick to itself, but it's going to leave some residue on the hook. Okay. I'm taking that off now. Another handy dandy tool that I really enjoy is a bowl scraper. Different than a bench scraper, it's got a round edge here, and that's for when you have dough like this. You can oh, sorry, wrong camera. So you can make it, you can release it from the bowl more easily. So I just scrape around here, release it. You can see it's quite sticky still. Can you see that? Not perfectly formed. Definitely, if you stick your finger in it, it's going to get stuck on your finger. But that's okay. So I sort of use the bowl scraper to form a mass. If I were to take it out, I could put in a bowl to rise, but part of my goal when I'm making stuff is to have as few dishes as possible. And so I just leave it in the same mixing bowl here to rise. So cover it, you can cover it with plastic or you can cover it with a damp tea towel. I will say I've been doing more baking this spring, and just the amount of waste of, like, you know, foil and plastic wrap, and, you know, I feel a little bit bad about that. So I've been trying to figure out ways to sort of, you know, hacks, and yeah, so whenever I can avoid plastic, I try. Oh, and then another tip that actually my husband gave me is that to, you know, especially in the winter when you're trying to let your dough rest, we put it in our oven with the oven light on. And that just creates enough warmth that the inside of the oven is nice and warm, and it actually cuts the proving time. And it's a nice little hack that I found. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it in here. Okay, and then we wait for 45 minutes, but this is the magic of having prepped ahead of time. Oh boy, this is a kind of a mess. So I'll let you know. Can you guys still hear me? The first time I did this recipe, because of the way it came from the dining service system, I wasn't sure if an egg went into the actual dough or not. It just said like liquid eggs, add all ingredients, mix. And so I did it without the egg the first time. Dough came out really nice, much cleaner than the dough you saw just now. And then I made it again a couple times and I added the egg, and I think it gave it a nicer airiness in the when you're actually making the honey buns. And so I think the egg does belong in the dough. However, if you're rushing for a webinar and making multiple batches ahead of time so you can show TV magic, and you forget to add the egg, and then you try to add it later on, it's kind of a mess. So I don't know if this is going to work. We'll just have to go with it. You'll see. It'll be a grand reveal in a sec. Let me just set up. This is a nice little mat that I got online that makes rolling out dough, cutting things up, measuring, you can see it's got circles on it. So if you're rolling out pie dough, it helps you figure out how big your piece needs to be. So I also just kind of made my honey bun dough about these dimensions, which I think I might be wrong in the recipe. So what did we say? We said 28 by 20. It's more like 15 by 20. But again, if you make it a couple times, you'll see these honey buns. I've heard that they've gotten smaller than my day. I remember sort of like practically platter sized buns. They are like, like a decent size, like a large donut these days. So this is something in between. It's going to be a little bit bigger than what dining services currently serve, but maybe not as big as the ones that we used to get. Okay, so this dough turned out to be a mess. So I'm going to flour the surface quite liberally. I think I'm actually going to need more flour than usual, but flour the surface. And then this is what it looks like now. It's risen, but yours will look nicer than this. The egg was added super late, and it's risen. You can feel it's warm. So the yeast has worked. It is coming away from the edges a little bit here, so it's not just like soup, but this is not what you want your dough to look like. Sorry. Okay, so bowl scraper again, kind of oozes out onto your surface. I'm going to go extra generous with the flouring because it is so wet. I think I see Martha Story Dills on here. Is it Martha Story? Sorry. And she's like a real baker. So Martha, give us any tips if literally written cookbooks. So I'm a little bit intimidated. But the nice thing too about doing a webinar, if Alumni Relations ever asks you to do it, one, I would say, check in with me first about the prep, but two, nobody's going to taste this except for the people in my house. So if it's terrible and I put salt in instead of sugar, or orange extract instead of vanilla extract, you guys aren't going to know, which is really nice. Okay, so I wanted to make sure this is not completely just like a goopy mess. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to have some form, and luckily it is still staying a little bit. So then just roll it out. I used this earlier, so flour here. I'm not very precise about this. They say to roll it out to about a 1/4 inch. Rarely is my entire batch like the same thickness. If you can get it to be quite uniformly the thickness uniform, you'll have an easier time rolling it up. It'll it'll look nicer, all that good stuff. But if you're just doing it to eat at home with your family, I think it's okay, to just shoot for. Don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. So try to roll it out. Those little shards are just because I didn't clean my rolling pin from when I made another batch earlier. There's another batch waiting for me to show you guys. So I roll it out here. You want it to be a rectangle. If you were like a pastry chef and being really, really precise, you would cut off the messy edges. I kind of like that doughier part. But okay, so. And this does smell great for those of you who are making it now in like 45 minutes or so. It's going to smell so nice and homey in your kitchen. All right. So roll it out for the most part. Is there a question? And then here's where that second egg comes in. We're going to do an egg wash. So
There is one question from Mary Beth. She's saying, so will our dough be thicker but still sticky? I think when you were pulling it out and out of the.
it will be a little thicker, but it shouldn't be too sticky anymore. Once you've let it rise, it will, you know, all the ingredients will kind of incorporate, and it won't be really, really sticky. And even this one, which I'm surprised, we'll see when I roll it, was not super, super sticky. You're still able to sort of make it do stuff that you wanted to do. So then I just egg wash, just, again, I use chopsticks for this. I guess others would use a fork. But, up the egg, then I saved my purple pastry brush for this occasion. Egg wash all over. So I have sometimes just dumped all of the egg on top and then spread it out. It works fine, but it is probably a little too liquid, and depending on the size of your eggs, those can also vary. And so, you know, this is just to help the cinnamon stick, give it a little bit of color. We're not being super precise here about what we're doing or how much we're putting on. So wash. Okay. So then cinnamon, I said a liberal amount of cinnamon. I think 2 teaspoons actually is plenty. I often just have it in the scoop itself and kind of throw it on top. But if you want a little better distribution, you can use a little sieve thing like this. So you might have it for powdered sugar, but this looks better than the clumps that you would otherwise get knocking your little teaspoon against your hand. But this is on the inside of the bun. Nobody's going to see it. It's just for taste. So it doesn't have to be perfect, and it's all going to roll up together. So as long as you spread it out fairly evenly, you'll be good. But this is one of those things, like, you love cinnamon, go ahead, add a ton more. Really dislike it, it's okay. I don't think it's absolutely crucial here to add a whole 2 teaspoons. Okay, so now we're gonna roll it up. My hands are a little bit sticky, so I'm gonna just rinse it off.
Geraldine, there's a question in the chat asking, have you ever tried using butter for the cinnamon to stick to? Faith does something similar for a cinnamon bun recipe she makes.
Yes, I think I have tried that with other recipes, not with this one. Grabbing a tea towel here. I have not tried it with this one. I think I'm sure it would work similarly. Martha, chime in here if you have advice, but you know, egg and butter, I think, probably do different things in the heat, and so it might end up tasting or acting a little different when you fry it. And this is what Dining Services does, so we'll go with what they do. Okay, so roll it from the short end all the way up. I don't know if you guys can quite see, but just tuck it. You know, if you roll, and can you guys see, I guess with this camera, if you lift it a little bit, it sort of helps you not just push the egg to the other side. So little, you know, go from both sides. I'm going to end up having to scrape it a little bit, probably because it was kind of sticky to get it off the mat. Not too bad. But of sort of a roll and lift kind of movement here. So this is the part when you asked earlier, maybe not where people would necessarily mess up the recipe, but just like the part that for me at least has been the most challenging is these, this step and then the next one, where we're cutting this actual roll. And then for when you reach the end here, I just pulled that up so that you don't have to go all the way over. And then if you have a little egg wash or water, you can use it at the seam to try to get it to stick a little bit. But then you have your roll. I'm just gonna clear off the mat a little bit here. And then I usually just roll it over so that it's seam side down. Okay, you guys can probably see I'm doing these little movements to pull up the bits of dough. Hopefully you won't have to. Hopefully your dough will be drier than this one. But okay, so seam side down. Sometimes I give it a little push on the ends. Like, let me see if I can change the angle here a little bit if that helps. So I can like push it a little bit, just like tuck it like that. And then for those of you who don't already do this, this is sort of my favorite trick. And it doesn't work. It's not worth it for every recipe, but for this one, it seems to help is unscented, or if you like a little bit of artificial mint in your honey bun, you can use scented, but unscented dental floss. So what I usually do, and this is a tricky part, you know what, you want to get it under. And I usually try to get it under here and get it to the middle. And then you just pull opposite sides together across, and that's a cut. Okay, you see now there's two pieces. And then I've found that this recipe makes about 12, no matter how sort of approximate my cuts are, but it's sort of between 12 and 14 depending on how thick you are. Dining Services says inches, and so this is going to be more than, if I did it just specifically inches, it's going to be what, 2, 4, 6, yeah, possibly up to 16 here. But this part you see, oh, you know what we're going to do? I forgot, I didn't do this yet. We're going to prep the pan that we're going to let them rise in. So so I learned the hard way that if you don't use lots of space to let them prove, they will stick to each other. So I've got two pretty decent sized sheet pans and then another one here. These do have a lip to them. Yours doesn't have to, but the reason I like the lip is that when we cover it with plastic, it prevents the plastic from resting on top of the dough. But we'll also do some stuff to help prevent sticking later. So got your sheet pans here. Parchment paper. So this part, I did try it with a Silpat. If those of you have like a silicone mat, like this. Again, in the effort to not waste too much. For home use, I would say do it with this. We're gonna spray it with oil and then flour it a little bit, and that should work for your home when it doesn't have to be perfect. But if you're bringing it somewhere and you want people to be really impressed with how it looks, then the parchment paper is handy because you'll see later we can cut it up as we put them into the fryer. So cut 3 pieces of parchment. And then put it in here. And then spray it down a little with vegetable oil. And then also add some flour to it. And this is all because this is kind of a wetter dough. When you let it sit and then need to take it out to fry, you want it to not stick together, stick to the surface as much. So I'm gonna run this around a little bit, ideally over your sink in case you spill it, but do that with all 3. And then I'm going to bring this guy a little closer. So here's one of my trays, so that when we go back to the cutting with our dental floss here, so that when you've got your little roll, you don't have to go too far. But I don't know if you saw it from the side, but they like to come apart a little bit. So that the inside coils will kind of like squeeze out a little. It's okay, just pick it up. Here, I'm gonna show you guys here. And then down like this. Put it into your oiled and floured pan. And then try to get this better angle for you guys. You can always put the ugly side down so that when it rises, you'll have the more even side that's rising up. So can't tell which camera is best. Okay, so yeah, so this is the part when you squeeze it like this, you can see the center sometimes likes to squeeze out, but it's still a decent roll. And then I'll quickly finish this up. How's everybody who's making it at home? Are you guys just letting your dough rest for now? Faith, is that what you're doing? Who else? Faith and I used to work basketball games together. We did game clock and shot clock, right, Faith?
That is correct. I was just telling my husband about that. And yes, I'm letting my dough rest while I have a glass of Prosecco.
Oh yeah, I forgot to say that. This is like practically late afternoon here, so.
Keith,
Yeah, we got paid to watch basketball. It's pretty great.
it definitely was.
So that's, I put 5 in here. Let's see if I can show you. See how spread out they are? And okay. Try to do this quickly so that it's not too boring on your end. This is also a very satisfying feeling of using dental floss to cut this roll. And actually, it's harder to find unscented dental floss these days. Stop and Shop did not have it, so I had to order some. Okay. This is like a 1.5 inches. This is going to be like this is going to be something that's more like our day. So you can experiment with the size. You'll see my rolls have never been perfectly cylindrical, you know, evenly, even thickness throughout. And so as you cut your buns, you'll see that some of them will be quite a bit larger than others. And then the only thing, we'll talk about this when we do it, but the only thing to watch out for that is when you're frying it, you want to make sure that you vary up the time a little bit for a smaller bun versus a bigger bun. So, okay, I've got, how many did I get? 5, 6, 11. I got 14 out of that. Okay, this is another part that I don't love, but we do use some plastic wrap here. And I cut a piece and I do spray it down because when it sticks, it's no fun. So spray, and then I will put this sprayed side down onto the buns. I guess, Layla, we can maybe turn on this camera, the second camera, since I'm over here now. So I'm just covering this up quickly. And then can you guys still hear me, or should I change microphones?
You're good, Geraldine.
So then same here, these go into the oven to proof. Then you'll see that they get a lot bigger. This batch I put in right before the seminar started, or the webinar started. Definitely messy because I was rushing, but they are bigger, fluffier, they smell yeasty good. We have these guys out here. I'm gonna work with those. Work with those 2 sets for now. Okay. So you want to stick your buns into the, I guess we can turn off the other camera now. Because we'll mostly be over here now. So yeah, so then these buns have already risen. And the reason we do the plastic wrap, spray it down, is that less chance of them sticking completely to the wrap. So you can handle it a little more easily that way. So, okay, next step, after you've let the buns prove for about 45 minutes or so, you can check on it. Sometimes it's just half an hour. Really to like a consistency you like. Throw a big pan of oil on to heat. So we have an induction range and it does a pretty fast job. So I think I estimated about a quart. You can sort of, you can look at, you probably want like a good 1.5 inches, 2 inches of oil in your pan in order for you to be able to handle the frying. Okay, so we can see, I'll start heating up the oil here. Dining services recipe said to heat it to 375. I've been doing 350 because I found that got a little bit too brown too quickly at 375. But just so you know, that was the original recipe, so you could check it out when you're trying it yourself. Okay, so then here's another trick. When I was doing these at first and I didn't do it this way, I found it really frustrating to get these honey buns off of the sheet into the fryer. So thermometer. So one thing I found somebody suggest online is if you cut up the parching paper, this is why it won't work with a silk hat, but if you do the parching paper route like this, you can cut them up into their individual little sheets, and then they're easier to work with as you fry them. We have these handy dandy frying spiders here, but if you don't have them, you could just, well, if you're super brave, you could plop it in by hand, but it's super hot oil. I don't recommend that unless you're a pro. So you can use tongs or something else, but you want to, you want it to release fairly quickly and easily without misshaping the bun too much. And so that was a challenge I found. So this setup has worked the best for me, but you guys might find something else works for you. So I've got a cool instant read thermometer here. The oil's already heating up, 220. I'm just going to give it a minute or two here while I give it a couple more seconds. Cut up the parching paper. Do we have any locals on the call? I know Martha. Anybody else? Because there's going to be like 3 batches of honey buns at the Shen Bertrand household this afternoon. And anybody who lives within, 15-20 minute drive or is willing to drive, please come and get some. Let you know where I live, or Dewey House, if you remember. Okay, let's see, what's this at? It's heating up nicely. It's just about 300 degrees now. So then we can, I just use like a baking drying rack here. Paper towels. pretty much there. I can show you. Okay. So then you take your individual sheet of Honeybun here. I pop it onto Cider, and you can, if you've oiled it and floured it pretty well, your bun should detach from its paper, and if it doesn't, give it a little help. That's a little messy, but okay. And then you plop it in. So I usually do 2 at a time. There's not much space for more. I'm gonna do this. Let's see. My camera, Layla, the phone camera, the one that was facing down. If you want to turn that back on, I can at least show people what's happening in the pot. Does that work?
I think you just need to turn it on.
Okay. Okay, you see it's in here. I also have a timer going here for about 1.5 minutes. I turned it on a little late, so I'll probably not go the full 1.5 minutes, but I found that by eye is best. And you're, at least if you're like me, you're gonna end up with some browner and some golden honey buns, but these have been in the fryer now for maybe 1 minute. The oil temperature is around 360, 375, picking up a little bit. So I'm going to just take a peek here and look at it. And that's actually a decent color right there. So I'm going to flip them over. They went in at different times. So I'm going to let this one sit for another couple seconds. And then flip that over. This is also, again, another 60, 90 seconds. If you feel comfortable, I would say definitely check on them to see what color they're turning. But, you know, to the earlier question about sort of most difficult part, this is another part for me where I feel like there's a lot of leeway for messing up or for things going a little bit too long, not quite long enough. If you want, you can, I think I looked up other recipes, internal temperature for a bun like this should be around 150. So if you have an instant thermometer, you can stick it in to see if it's reaching that temperature internally.
Geraldine, there are a couple of questions in the chat. Someone is asking whether they would need to oil the spider as well. And then can you freeze the honey buns after they've been cooked?
I did not oil the spider. I don't think it would hurt to do that. So for sure, if you wanted to go ahead and do that. I'd be curious if you could freeze them before frying and then let them thaw and then fry. If you froze them after frying, I think they'll end up pretty, it just won't taste as good, you know, like, but actually you could try it because we've done it with apple cider donuts. So, weird not seeing you guys, so I'm gonna come back up here. So I've done it with apple cider donuts before. They're nice and small. These are donuts too, oopsies. I would say that's too brown. I'm just busy chatting with you guys. It'll be fine. So, and if you're able to get it to look like dining service, I know they're so ugly right now. These are not my best ones, guys, but the underside is prettier. Let's look at that side instead. So you want to let them drip dry a little bit. I haven't gotten them for the coils to stay a little bit more separate the way dining services are. I think their coils are thicker. But then when I did it a thicker, like have each coil be thicker, it didn't roll up as nicely. Like it felt like it was not quite, we're not really aiming for Swiss roll, but it wasn't, you know, it didn't feel like there were enough loops. So I'm gonna put this down for a sec.
Quick question, you're draining those on parchment paper on a rack, or is that paper towel?
Paper towel. So this takes a little while, but it's sort of the end, except we haven't glazed them. And definitely you want your honeybuns to cool off before you glaze them. So I'm not going to glaze these right now because, well, if you want to just glaze, you can do it while it's hot. But if you want to sort of have it look a little bit more like a frosted honey bun, then you want to wait for it to cool off a bunch because the glaze will just like melt right away when you, if you put it on before the bun is cooled fully. So all that to say, this is sort of the end of the instructional part of the webinar. We've gone through all the steps. It's a little bit messy, but they'll still be delicious. I've made several test batches, and even the ones that are really ugly, people seem to eat them. So
to get the grilled part of the grilled honey bun, do you just then slice them in half, right? And then sort of grill them like on a grill top with some butter or spray, I guess?
exactly.
Okay.
Slice in half, grill it, you know, and then
Just trying to remember from all those years ago.
I was super surprised when I saw the recipe and it said nothing about baking. And that these were just straight up donuts that we then additionally buttered and grilled. So, you know, when you're in your 20s, you can do whatever you want and it doesn't matter. But
I have a recipe from Dining Services from, I think in like 2006 or something. I had a huge craving to make pits for dirt for a Halloween party. I thought it would be great to have like, and I put little like Peeps ghosts in the top of it. And so I emailed Dining Services because I used to work there, and they very graciously sent me a scaled down version of the recipe for pits for dirt, which I still have saved in my email. But again, the proportions were so odd. It was like 3/16 of a, like what, it was like very strange to have it calculated from the mass Dining Services recipe. So I understand what you were saying at the beginning.
yeah.
But if anyone thought it's for dirt recipe, I have it.
Yeah.
I wondered whether you could, if you didn't want to fry them all at once, I wonder if you put the proofed rolls in the fridge, and then I wonder how many days they might keep in the fridge, and you could fry a couple at a time, maybe rather than freezing. I don't know. It wouldn't last as long, obviously, but I wonder if they could keep in the fridge for a little bit, and then you could fry a couple every day, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's why I was hoping to talk to the Dining Services folks, so that they could tell us how they prepare it. I'm sure, you know, they must prepare things ahead of time. So if I get that information, I'll send it on to you guys. But let's see, these guys
I'm wondering if you could freeze it before the second proof, like, you know, those croissants and stuff that you get from like Trader Joe's, and you take them out of the freezer the night before so that they do their second proof overnight. So maybe if you froze them after you sliced them, and then you took them out of the freezer the night before, and then you could just make them on a morning or on a day, maybe that would work.
froze them after you slice them. Yeah. So it's that, yeah.
Before they rise at all that second time, just put them straight in the freezer.
Yeah.
You could probably even freeze them like in the spread apart until they get nice and solid. You could, you know, just put them in a bag or whatever once they're not going to stick together, to save on space in your freezer.
Yeah, that's actually worth a shot. Maybe I'll, I do. I have another couple batches of dough after this, so I could try it then and let you guys know. But I think that for those of you who are so politely hanging on, this is sort of the end. What I do with the glazing, just to show you, wait, do I have any here? I'll let this guy totally fry. You're okay. Where's my glaze? So So the glaze is like pretty thick now. See that? I just like throw it on with a spatula. I kind of like how the messy and then it spreads out. So which one of these? This one is somewhat cool. Maybe I'll try it here. Just do it two-handed here. Just with the spatula, let it kind of hang out in the middle, and then whoop, and then it'll spread out. But this is the honey bun. You know what I'm going to do here while a couple people are still here? I'm going to cut one and see what it looks like inside.
I think it bears mentioning that your baking skills and your camera skills are excellent, Geraldine.
Thank you, thank you. I complete amateur at both, but I don't know if this is a liberal arts person in me, but I'm willing to try anything, you know? And I think as long as you're okay with like failing or, you know, not having it be perfect the first time around, then like I'll try anything. But this is, you know, it's a decent, that's a decent crumb on the inside there.
I don't think Paul Hollywood would turn his nose up at that.
Pretty messy. It's pretty messy, but you know what, Paul Hollywood, this is an American thing. You don't understand it. So, any other questions? I'm gonna probably do the rest slowly over time, but yeah. Questions, concerns, there's stuff in the chat I haven't seen, but Layla, you've been monitoring. I want to say a huge shout out to our alumni relations staff. They're wonderful. They've got families that they ignore on weekends and evenings so that they can tend to us as alumni and make sure that we feel connected and excited and interested in continuous learning. So I certainly am blessed with living near many of them. And so I really appreciate what you guys are doing. And check out the rest of the programming for the 200 years of Society of Alumni Goodness. And if you have questions, hopefully you all know how to access your alumni directory, because then that's how we can find each other. So you can feel free to email me, Geraldine Shen. I also actually have a Williams College email address, so gshen@williams.edu would also find its way to me. So thank you all for being here. I will say that I was definitely nervous getting ready for this, like flour on my face, but I had to just remind myself that it's Williams folks. They're wonderful. They are critical thinkers, so they likely have, you know, tough questions for me, but for the most part, I felt like I was doing this for like an extended family, so that made the stress levels better. Thanks, Peter. All right.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Thank you, guys. I didn't know if you had comments, Leila, to finish.
No, just want to say thank you so much to Geraldine for opening up her kitchen and her home and for trialing many versions of this recipe to get it just right. So thank you so much. We're so appreciative, Geraldine.
Nobody else I would ever do it for, just for ease. Okay, I think if that's it.
All right, well, thank you all.
I see everybody who's here, but thank you to those of you who had your cameras on, and I could see some friendly faces.